I'm a firm believer everybody has a story. And if you give people enough time to tell you their story, it is amazing what you'll figure out and what you'll hear.
Welcome to the Cultivating Leaders Podcast, where we get inside the minds of leaders to harvest great ideas and lessons that help you grow as a difference maker in food and agriculture. I'm your host and curiosity captain, Nicole Ursig. Real leadership happens when innovation, impact, and commercial excellence collide. Today's guest is Jarrod Gillig. He is the Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Beef at Cargill Food North America, leading one of the most complex, high-impact businesses in food production. His work spans producers, retailers, and consumers, and the decisions his team makes ripple across economies, communities, and of course, the dinner table. Jarrod, welcome to the pod. What did I miss from your bio?
Yeah, you bet. Well, first off, excited to be here, and I'm an active listener of your podcast, so it's pretty cool to sit on this side of the table. The only thing I'd probably add to the bio is I've got a pretty unique seat. I mean, with my involvement and leadership there with Cargill, I'm also where you're finding me today is actually at my home, and I live, on our family operations. So we'll farm roughly 3,700 acres, and between farm and ranch ground, and we'll have about 240 cows. So it's a pretty cool area to be both on the production agriculture side, as well as more of that production as I think about beef production and plant processing and getting meals on folks' tables. Pretty cool.
Absolutely. That is a really cool seat and perspective, because sometimes the ranch and the packer can feel disconnected, but the fact that you get to see both sides of it every single day is fascinating, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's pretty fun and leads to some pretty interesting conversations as you can get.
Oh, I can imagine. So for folks who may be unfamiliar, or I'm sure everyone has heard of Cargill, but can you give some perspective to what Cargill is and what your job actually looks like kind of day to day?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, so Cargill is a family-owned organization. So we would have started in 1865. William Wallace Cargill started as in Conover, Iowa, as a grain trader, and started with an elevator, and has now become, somebody as an organization. We've got 160,000 employees across the world. We operate in the protein business. We operate in food, so we've got our crushing facilities as well, kind of our ag and trading group that would make biodiesel. We do chicken production around the world. We've got a joint venture in the United States on chicken. We do, when you think about ingredients, we recently did a kind of a showcase on Food North America, our leadership team, and we did a grocery cart. And it's pretty awesome to see everything from, the corn that goes into Molson Coors to chocolates. We've got an entire chocolate business. We've got even the starches that go on barbecue briquettes. I mean, there's all kinds of things in between that go in there. We're really proud of the products we make, and candidly, not what you see in the grocery store, but a lot of times we're in those ingredients. So, even the eggs, we make 100% of the eggs across all of the U.S. for McDonald's, and so there's some pretty cool facts, and it's a great pride to be a part of, putting this many meals on folks' tables.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have spent most of your career with Cargill, right?
I have actually. So I've been with Cargill. This is my 27th year
Wow,
with Cargill.
congratulations. That's
So
awesome.
thank you. Yeah, it's an outstanding experience. I actually started in sales, and I was hired for sales I went to Oklahoma State, and then and got hired into sales, and we went to a sales training program, and I was in Schuyler, Nebraska, and I fell in love with the operations. I truly am just, and continue to be. I mean, I've been part of this business for 27 years, and I go into a harvest facility and just continue to be enamored with the process. It just is so fascinating, the transition from muscle to meat, and just using all aspects of that carcass, and just the harmony it takes for a team. I kind of liken it to a parade that never stops. You've got animals walking in, and we got boxes going out, and it's just pretty cool. So anyway, I had the opportunity to stay in operations, so I never went into sales. So most of my career has been through the operations team, and have had the opportunity, to kind of grow up in the beef business and go through multiple different roles, and you know was able to manage multiple sites. Spent some time in Canada, led the McDonald's business on the beef side for Cargill up in Canada for a while, and then came back down to the States and got to go back to Schuyler at one point in time and actually become the general manager there. And that was a lot of fun. There was a lot of folks that helped my career and step into that. So I've been blessed by a lot of different things. And then with my current role, basically responsible for the procurement team all the way through our customers, and just sitting in that seat and being able to do that, candidly, it's a dream. I mean, this is a dream job I had, and I'm pretty excited to be sitting here.
That's awesome. So, do you think you would ever be where you're at today?
I didn't. I actually grew up in Missouri, so I grew up in Odessa, Missouri, and we would have run somewhere around 30 to 35 cows in registered Angus operation. And I was highly involved in 4-H and was the chairman of the Junior Angus board. And at the time, I would have told you that I was going to go work for a breeder, or, I was going to go spend time, maybe working on a feed yard. I mean, and there's kind of all kinds of things, but really thinking about it, I wanted to be on the live side of what we were doing, and hadn't really spent a lot of time with Cargill, and then obviously went through some interviews there at Oklahoma State, and was really intrigued by Cargill and some of the stuff they were offering, and I'm really blessed to have been given that opportunity to join the team and get into this. But by no means did I think this was the path I was on.
When you look back at the career you've had thus far, do you have any pivotal moments or people that you can look back on and be like, this is what directed me down this path?
Yeah, yeah, I would say several. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is the general manager. When I went to Schuyler there in 1998, Vaughn Bloom would have been the general manager for us, and he had a leadership team. Don Porter. There were several folks that were super integral in like, you start seeing these individuals and you think about, man, that leadership style, like, you just gravitated to it. They were so humble. They were just, they cared. They'd ask, great questions. And so I really aspired to be like Vaughn, candidly. And as I grew in my career, he became somebody that I would spend a lot of time talking with, and he would kind of help guide me, particularly as I became a general manager. So I was one of the youngest general managers, promoted with Cargill when I was in Freona, Texas. And Vaughn spent quite a bit of time, just checking in on me, seeing how things were going, and I always just truly appreciated that. But I've been blessed by some great folks. Bill Rupp and Steve Mellinger kind of gave me that opportunity, and then John Keating, he really stepped in, and just from a business acumen standpoint, John Keating was somebody who was really, really influential with me.
As you talk about leadership styles that you gravitate towards, tell me how would you describe your leadership style today and how has it evolved?
Yeah. So it's definitely evolved, and there are probably times early in my career where I'd like to go and do a rewind and kind of go back and fix that. Like, the younger Jarrod probably didn't understand the impact of decisions or the impact of conversations as much as I do today. Um, as I look at as I look at my leadership, the thing that I really want to focus on is from a humility standpoint. I truly believe we've been given this opportunity. I don't believe this is something that I deserved. I think I've been given it, and I take that, with a great amount of pride. I enjoy having fun. I mean, the beef business today is extremely tough. I mean, you can go out and look at margins. I mean, it's pretty rough, but you've got to enjoy it, right? You've got to have fun. I truly believe it's like a family, and so we got to have a lot of fun. Super accountable. I mean, you got to make sure you hold yourself accountable. And then I also am super candid, and I believe candor is a gift. Um, you got to do it with respect. But life is too short not to be candid with somebody and tell them. And clarity is kind, and just having that conversation, right? Like, they may not want to hear immediately what you're saying, but long term, you're going to make a better leader as a result of doing that. So, and the other thing I would tell you is the speed of our business, life, it just happens too quick that you can't like beat around the bush. You have to tell you, it's just, you got to do it and you got to go. And candidly, we're making this decision. We're going to move on to the next one. So,
Yeah, I love that. I also am someone who really values candor, and I always tell people, I want you to tell me if I have lipstick on my teeth, not just physically, but
yeah,
metaphorically.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
kind. I may be embarrassed, but I need to know. Yeah.
Well, I was actually in a conversation this morning with with our lead trader and who leads our risk and trading side of the business. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time challenging my leadership team with, and Adam and I were in this conversation this morning about let's make sure we don't get an echo chamber. Like we've got to have debates. And I think that's also important, as I think about leaders and not to go into any history there, but folks that kind of surrounded themselves with folks that wouldn't push back or wouldn't argue. So anyway, I value that a lot. I think whenever we fall into an echo chamber and we just kind of start agreeing with each other, that's where we're placing the business at risk because we're not looking at the opposite views, or we're not understanding what the antagonist side of our decision is. And so anyway, I value that, and I think that candor in building that culture to where folks can actually feel vulnerable and actually step out there and say, "Hey, wait a minute, I disagree. This is what I think," and then we enter into debate. And candidly, I truly do enjoy that. I mean, that's a fun part of the job.
Yeah, I would agree. I always enjoy mentally sparring with people, and it's not an emotional thing by any chance, but when you get a bunch of smart people who think differently in a
Oh
room,
yeah.
it can be really fun, honestly.
Well, and it's pretty cliche to say this, but it's a multiplier, right? I mean, it that literally is how you get two plus two to equal 10. It doesn't even you go way past four because you're thinking of things differently, and it allows you to kind of get out of yourself, and then what that will drive in others is pretty high performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about how you approach building a team and an environment where that type of like safety of conversation and debate and difference of thought can thrive.
Yeah. So diversity, in my mind, making sure that you've got diversity as part of that team. I mean, Cargill truly values that, and we look at it and we say, diversity. There's a lot of definitions across diversity, but what Brian Sykes, our CEO, the way he really comes in and talks about it, and I absolutely love this. It's an oasis of decency. Like how do we create an oasis of decency to where everybody can come, everyone can thrive, everyone can be themselves, but that doesn't mean we can't have different views. That doesn't mean we can't think of things differently. But we all get along. We can have debates. We walk away. We still, go to the same, grab a coffee together or whatever. So when you're thinking about building a team, like making sure that you're bringing together different thoughts and different perspectives. We've got consumers all across the board, and we want to serve them all. So how does our leadership team help kind of represent that consumer base so that we can understand, the folks that we're serving? So that would be an aspect of it. Obviously, I want, as I look at folks, you want a high performer. I mean, everybody wants a high performer, and I probably spend more time, on folks, that, from a performance standpoint or their knowledge of the business. Like I can train folks along as long as they have a willingness to learn, a thirst, a hunger. And, there's some great examples with that too. So not necessarily always looking for an expert, but definitely looking with somebody who is confident and can dig in and is willing and has shown that they will actually like say, you know what, I was wrong. I need to go do this different. And if you don't have somebody that's kind of got that degree of humility, they're probably not going to thrive very well with me. I mean, because there's going to be times where we're going to get in debates pretty good, and I'm going to say I'm wrong, but likewise, in order to build the team that we need to be able to tell each other that, what, we screwed up, and this is what we're going to do different. And what action are you going to do? I spend a lot less time spending time with the mistakes or the first several mistakes even. it's more of when it becomes a habit or we continue to lean into that and we're not learning from it, at that point in time, we're letting the team down. So, there's a degree of accountability there.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like, Jarrod, you're someone who also moves fast. How do you, what we're talking about takes time, right? To have debate and think about things and make decisions and also learn from them at the same time. How do you balance the need for some of those conversations and the piece of reflection to learn from either good or poor business decisions, and maintain that fast pace of, okay, decide, move forward, execute?
Nicole, you're really, really good at this game. But that is a weakness of mine, right? Like there's times where I don't allow myself enough time to do that, or um, there's times where I'm probably rushing the team, or I feel like I am, and candidly, the team will actually say, "Hey, wait a minute, we need to spend a little bit more time here. Like we know where you're at, but the rest of us aren't there with you. So let's pause here for a quick second. Let's have a conversation." And so my ops lead's name's Leon Fletcher, and Leon probably does that the best for me, where he'll literally like, kind of check you and say, "Yeah, yeah, I get it. Let's pause here for a quick second. Let's make sure we're having this conversation. We didn't debate this quite enough." So having that relationship with folks, and the other thing is there is times where it's a really heavy subject, and you'll devote more time to that. You spend more time, or I feel like you can kind of you know we are truly a people business, and so being around folks and helping lead folks, I can read into things when things aren't quite going the way I would anticipate them, or I have them in my head. At that point in time, I'll actually step back and say, "Hey, let's do a one-on-one conversation. So let's pull out of this meeting, and that person or a couple folks will just have a one-on-one conversation and say, "Hey, I I feel like it's not quite landing, or I'm not understanding your perspective. Can you walk me through that a little bit?" And just taking the time to invest in that. And I do a lot of one-on-one type stuff. It's because I think in group meetings, if they're not set up correctly, you're going to lose that. I mean, you just lose those conversations where people will actually give you a nugget of information that was probably pretty critical, but for one reason or another, it didn't come out. And so spending a little bit of time, whether that's, hey, we'll go grab lunch together, or go grab coffee, or I do a lot of management by wandering around, so I'll just go drop by their office, or hey, let's have a quick conversation. Since COVID, candidly, that's one thing that has become tougher, because it feels like everybody schedules meetings now, and it's a struggle for me. I don't truly appreciate that all the time, because I do actually kind of like wandering in and just creating a natural conversation with folks. But yeah, that's one of the things that came out of COVID that's probably not the highest on my list of appreciation. So,
Makes
as
sense.
of many, unfortunately.
Yes, that was a real tough time to be in the packing business.
Well, it was. Yeah, and at the time I was leading operations. So we had so there's 26,000 employees across North America, and that I was directly responsible for with our leadership teams. And we would have daily calls, and then across the organization I'd probably get 200 some folks on a weekly call, just giving them updates. And yeah, there was a lot going on. I can give you a play by play from my first COVID case that affected our plants, all the way through. I mean, it was a pretty intense time period. But I shared with folks, running out of toilet paper was one thing. If you didn't have meat on the shelf, or you didn't have food on the shelf. So what we did take what we did with a lot of pride, but it was not without the fact that we had to keep a really, really keen eye on our employees and what was happening. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting time, but also that's a time where you look and you get super proud of what folks do, and just the imagination and just the innovative nature of folks. We had our maintenance team in Pennsylvania that actually we were coming out. Hey, we had to get temperatures. This would be around March 15th or something, 16th. We had to start getting temperatures of everybody, and we sure didn't want to like put people in a line and put a thermometer in their mouth and then say they go left and this one goes right, and the next person gets the same thermometer. That'd be a horrible idea. So they came up. We do a lot of stuff with infrared with maintenance, and so we actually created a infrared. So folks would walk through a tent, and there was an infrared camera, and if you had an elevated temperature, you went to go see the nurse. If you're at normal, you walked through, and we literally over a weekend we put that in every site we have in North America, which at the time when I was leading all the operations for the protein business, that would have been 43 different plants. So it was
Wow.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so hard times, you can create some pretty cool stuff.
Yes. Crisis can drive innovation for sure.
It can, yeah.
Yes. So I love that story because to me, it talks about the scale that you are operating at. And help me understand how you approach it from a leadership standpoint of like there's a lot of responsibility both from a commercial standpoint for the business and then people accountability. And what is it like to do that at such a large scale?
Kind of give you another story of a perspective on that. The decisions we make whenever we're making a decision at a plant, and for anything, whether that be, I mean, obviously with constrained beef margins that or the challenging beef margins I'm in right now, I mean, we're reducing hours, but when we pull hours, the decision we're making for that facility is not those 2,200 employees that may be in Dodge City, Kansas. It's actually the 10,600 employee or 600 people I affect, because that's what our dependent roles. That's the number of folks that are counting on that paycheck. So that's the number of dependents I have coming out of that facility from an insurance standpoint. So whenever you're making a decision, we are a people business. I said that earlier. So we have to start with that. And I'm blessed to work for an organization who believes in that. And the Cargill family, I mean, that's probably one of the biggest questions I get from the Cargill family is just around our employee engagement. What are our employees? How are they feeling? So I'm absolutely blessed that just is a reaffirming, whether it's from our board or the family itself. So that you start with that, and then the second thing you start with is from a customer standpoint, how do we make sure we're servicing what as I make this decision, what is the effect of that, and then how do we make sure that we're going to be servicing the customers that we need to service because they're obviously counting on us. But from a decision standpoint, it does start with our employees first, and I'm just super blessed to work for an organization that allows me to do that.
What I just heard there, Jarrod, is that when you're making decisions, you're not just thinking about the outcome that you want, but the ripple effects and how it's going to impact other people and not just your employees, but their families and the communities that Cargill is in.
So yeah,
How did you gain that perspective? Because I don't think that that is something that like we all just innately have, right? Especially when you are leadership driven, like I got to get the things done. I've got to make these results happen, but thinking about things more holistically. How did you grow to get that type of perspective and thought process?
yeah. So I would tell you first, it's the leaders we've had in Cargill. It's the leaders I've been around. That's how they've led. And then personally, what that walk for me looked like is getting to know our team. And I'm a firm believer everybody has a story. And if you give people enough time to tell you their story, it is amazing what you'll figure out and what you'll hear. And one of the first stories, that came early in my career. I mean, when I was in Schuyler as a trainee, I was sent to the hot boxes so that's where we chill all the carcasses. So we'll have like 10,000 head on inventory, and I had to clean rails. So we had the rails come in, and there's wheels that roll on this, and so they get like grease on them, and I actually had to go back and wipe rails. And so the gentleman I was doing this with was from Mexico. He actually had a law degree from Mexico, had come up to the United States to work to better himself, wanted to live, brought his family up, and didn't know English. So I, spoke a little bit of Spanglish per se, and we definitely could understand each other. But he started telling me that they're going to the library and his kids are teaching them English. So he would literally, after work, go to the library, and his kids would read to him children's books, and that's how he was learning English. So that his goal was to take the bar exam here in the United States. I mean, that's what he wanted to do. So anyway, I was super intrigued by this. So as a, of course, just out of college, I show up at the library one night, and sure enough, if him and his family aren't sitting there, and to the day, it still sends chills on my back thinking about, you know, what, like, what folks go through to get things, and how Americans, we just take it for granted. We take so much stuff for granted. Anyway, that's just one example. But as you truly start to put connections to say everybody has a story, and how do I best serve them? I best serve them through the leadership of myself, through the leadership of my team, the viability of our plants. I mean, if our plants aren't viable and we have to make a decision on them, which unfortunately I have had to do in my past, then candidly I'm letting them down, right? And I take that really personally. So how do we make sure that we've got those decisions? Because when we're making those, we need to be telling them about it. We need to be talking to them about it, and we need to make sure that folks understand that. Because the longevity of their job, the longevity of the community, there's so much that goes to that. I mean, when you're talking 2,000 people in one of these plants, that it makes a significant portion of these communities.
Yeah. I got chills when you told that story. That's incredible.
It's a fun one. I've got some miraculous ones. I mean, it's all the way from um, Daisy. I think her last name was Zavala. She was actually from Honduras, and she used to speak to thousands of people on behalf of the government down there. And then she immigrated to the United States for a better life for her family. She was working, she was trimming, she was a skirt trimmer. So if you think of like fajita meat, she was trimming that. And you would never know she had this history of being a public speaker. And so anyway, one day I started chatting with her about it, and sure enough, she starts, she did not speak English really well at all. Actually, at the time, I don't think she spoke English at all. And anyway, so we started using her for like employee events. And she would, I mean, just absolutely awesome, right? I mean, she was super motivating, super. Anyway, if we tap into the talents of folks who we got around us, it's pretty cool stuff you can do.
And it sounds to me like being curious is probably a key to your leadership success, because if you didn't have those just curious questions with people that are, it sounds like at all levels of the organization, it to me sounds like, Jarrod, you use those little nuggets of information in those people's story to drive decisions at such a high level.
Yeah, I would agree to that. And again, um, I can probably thank my parents for that. I can thank, they were super influential as I think about how you just respect everybody. And I mean, it's just how I was raised. I mean, raised in rural America, and everybody puts their pants on the same way. And, it was just kind of the way. So I'm blessed by the folks I got too, as I sit there and reflect on that, and you reflect back to me on what I said there. So,
So, one of the things you talked about was leading yourself well. And I feel like that has been a theme, honestly, across this podcast. Is so many of the leaders say that to be able to grow or learn or be better, they've had to better get to know themselves and grow themselves first. What does that look like for you?
if you ask my team, it looks trying. But for me, it is spending some time in reflection, and I drive a lot. So I talked about being here at the farm, or at our ranch or whatever. And so I've got like a 2 hour and 45-minute commute down into Wichita, and I go down there, pretty much weekly. So I've got a good drive. I don't do it every day. Obviously, I stay down there when I go, but so I get a lot of thinking time. I do podcasts, but a lot of times I'll just put the radio on low, and I'll think and write notes on the side, and so I can spend quite a bit of time on that, and a lot of that is actually replaying what has occurred, or as I made a decision, or I got in a conversation, or maybe doing this podcast. I mean, I'll actually like go back and say, okay, what do I wish I would have done different there? And how can I show up better next time I get this opportunity to do something like this? The other thing I'll do is I actually met with the Attorney General in Nebraska yesterday, and had one of my colleagues from our government relations team with me, Katie Smith, and it's one of the things I'll drop Katie a note and just say, hey, how'd everything go? any suggestions you got, anything you saw, you know, just trying to figure out how do I continue to get feedback and improve whenever you're in those times. And even, you know, we do a town hall. I mean, I'll sit there and there's some folks out in the crowd that I'll, you know, whether they're direct reports of mine or folks, you know, deeper in the organization, and I'll just candidly ask, hey, any thoughts or suggestions, how did that resonate, or what we could do different? And you know, feedback truly is a gift. And again, that's a little cliche, but you know, feedback without any direction or feedback without any intention to do something different is actually just kind of words spoken. So how do you take that and actually do something with it? And you know, that hopefully I live by that. Again, I think my team would be a little bit hard to say. I don't know if I do the greatest job of that all the time. So you know, my humility coming through there, but
None of
yeah,
us are perfect.
none of us are perfect. That's true. Yeah.
As you look to create value both for the people and the like what you're doing at Cargill, especially as we look across the supply chain, and I think you have such an interesting perspective on this being a both a beef producer and working as a packer. What does that what does that look like to really create lift across a supply chain and value for customers and those who are feeding into Cargill? And how do you balance that, right? Because like even if we look at the beef world today, like margins, no one is ever winning all at the same time in agriculture is what I will say. And so how do you balance, who do you prioritize at the right time?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. So I actually did a podcast several years ago in Cargill. You know, I'll start with the back of your question, then we'll kind of move to the front. The In Cargill used to play this game, and it was called Win All You Can. And the idea of the game was you're kind of you've got there's a banker, there's like a central bank, and then there was like five teams, and and you actually everybody could win. There didn't have to be any losers, but the game was set up that clearly there was one winner and a loser in the instructions. But as you got into the game, everybody could win, and that's a challenge. I think we've got to figure out, you know, how do we win as an industry? Because from a viability standpoint, like we are seeing deeper, you know, deeper valleys and higher highs. I just personally don't think that is, I don't, I worry about the viability of that long term. I don't have an answer. I have debated this actually with quite a few economists and gotten some pretty interesting conversations, but I don't have a solution. You know, I'll have conversations with feeders, and I actually had a feeder tell me the other day that, and this a couple weeks ago probably, but the and he literally said, I actually don't want it to change. I live for the highs, and I know the lows are coming, and
Ah,
I am just so intrigued by that because as we look at
that man likes to gamble, it
he,
sounds like.
he did, and I actually asked him that, and he said, well, maybe that's true, but but as you think about getting the next generation involved in agriculture, I think we've got to figure out how do we create a more sustainable. But you know, one of the things that you've always got to remember is the only new dollars in the beef industry actually come from a consumer.
Amen.
So as we, you know, we are all getting increased costs. I mean, as I think about, you know, in the last, you know, as I think about my time frame at Cargill and what we've done in food safety expenses, I mean, our food safety expenses have jumped, I don't know, three times, at least two and a half times. If you just think about what we're doing today versus what we were doing, and it's why America can be so proud of the food system. I mean, we truly have a remarkable and robust food safety process across America, but it doesn't come without a cost. So you start thinking about all these elevated costs. So the producers are seeing it, we're seeing it. Really, those only new dollars come in. So anyway, so kind of back that up, and how do you start weighing this out? So I think you've got to stay relevant. You know, as we look at an organization, we look at ourselves, like staying still is not really an option. So we've got to figure out how to stay relevant. And relevancy, depending on what sector you're talking about, kind of goes all over the board, right? Like relevancy today with one of our retail customers or food service customers is, hey, what kind of value can bring me, right? My menu prices are seeing this, or my store shelves, these are the prices. Consumers are pushing back. How do you show, or what can we do to drive more efficiency through the system cattle cattle prices are at the highest. I mean, they understand that that doesn't flow. So then they start saying, you as a processor, how are you going to do this more efficiently? And so anyway, so we get in a lot of debates that way. So you've always got to have a lens on what are we doing from an efficiency standpoint? We did we kind of came out with what we're doing from an AI and technology standpoint around what we call CARD, which is AI vision that helps our employees. So it actually is measuring meat to bone ratios, candidly, what it's doing. But it actually measures that and gives immediate feedback to the employees, and then they are gamifying it. And the amount of pounds that we are actually moving from an inedible source, which may have gone into pet food or another source, and moving that to products that can now go into a caloric value for human consumption is just an absolutely awesome thing. So anyway, that you kind of think about that, and that's one way that we're driving or working to drive more efficiencies. You think about from a producer standpoint, how do we create more value? And the intersection of that, comes from the cattle quality. I mean, what we're seeing there, just the continued gain we see. So the premiums we can provide, as we flow that through. But the other thing that is pretty unique is around the sustainability conversation, because you've got customers that have made ESG target goals, and how do we now flow those dollars back to the producers? Because candidly, that cow-calf producer or the feed yard is where those dollars need to get to, because they're making the greatest impact. So being able to recognize them for their efforts, but again, it only comes from a consumer or the so so our customers have to make those decisions, because Cargill doesn't miraculously. I mean, we don't. We are a penny margin business. I mean, as you look across a 10-year cycle, it is a very low margin business. But because we do, 5.5 million head of cattle, I mean, we can, that adds up pretty quick. Uh, so as you think about it, though, that customer and how do we get more of those dollars back? So those are kind of two examples of things we're playing with and ideas. And we got some pretty cool things going on with cow-calf pilots, specifically around sustainability, that I look forward to talking about hopefully in the next 6 to 8 months. So, pretty cool stuff.
That's awesome. I could just nerd out with you on all things beef, Jarrod. So, as you're talking about technology and innovation and efficiency, I am curious, Jarrod, from your perspective, where you think the beef industry is going to go and what kind of people leadership we are going to need in order to execute this technology efficiently.
So, from a technology standpoint, I think particularly as you think of like harvest facilities and that physical production, that aspect of production agriculture, in the packing industry, I think technology is going to be it's going to be pretty awesome. We've already got like automated saws, so you just think about what we're doing from a safety standpoint. We've totally transitioned, you know, not all risk, but a significant portion of risk from these jobs, and then you know we're upscaling or upscaling the employees' responsibilities, right? I mean, we're moving more from, we still obviously have meat cutters, but you're moving from a lot of the meat cutters into more, hey, they're running these AI solutions and they're running robotics and they're doing. So I think that technical side, we're going to continue to do that. And today we grow that candidly. We have hired some of that, but a lot of that is actually internally grown. Again, find out what folks are interested in. Folks that are building computers at home, how do I get them a knife out of their hand and put them, doing other stuff? And then now they love their job because what they do in their free time, they're able to do at work. And that's a huge winning solution for us. So you've got that. I think like robotics and automation, trimming, I wish I could say, we've got some really cool thing coming and we're going to be able to trim meat with a robot. I don't know. I think maybe in time, the maturity of that will get there, but we're going to continue to be a pretty labor intense organization. So as I think about leaders, it's really folks that are willing to have conversations. I challenge whenever we get associates that come in and college associates we've hired, we pull them together and I joke with them and I'm like, the thing, I need you to be able to communicate on this, but I don't want this to be your communication style. Like, I can't text employees on the table. and tell them they need to trim better or tell them they need to do something. If I could, everybody would do it. That doesn't work. Like, I need you to have interpersonal conversations. And from society, we're losing that. So really figuring out how do we lean into that and spend a lot of time training on that. And then the other thing I would say is just, as we think kind of forward and what's coming at us, that skill level I think is huge, but we're going to have to get out of our own minds on reuse water, on, the ability to use the finite resources we have and to use them better. I think the other thing that absolutely terrifies me in this is the size of cattle. I mean, you think the cost of gains in a feed yard today is about $1. We're paying $2.40. Was kind of the last market, and so we're giving them $1.40 for every pound they put on an animal, and they are getting large. So whenever you think about a ribeye, and you go to a food service restaurant, and you buy a ribeye, you want something that's an inch thick and you want something that you can cook. You don't want a pancake steak, right? So, NCBA has been doing some great work on trying to figure out how to better utilize muscle cuts. But I think some of that we're going to have to figure out how to change, whether that you pull the spinalis off of that and now you got like the heart of a ribeye. I don't know what that creativity looks like. But in order to maintain that consumer demand, we're going to have to figure out how to fix that because nobody wants an 18-inch eye on a ribeye. But unfortunately, they're getting there, and that's because the market signals. And in tight cattle supplies, we can't send a different signal because we're just literally trying to fill a plant. So right now the feeders are kind of having their way with taking it higher. I did a cattle procurement, had a conversation yesterday or 2 days ago, and year on year we're 35 pounds heavier on carcass. And if you go back in history, we've gained 5 pounds a year for probably the last 15 to 20 years. And this year we gained 35. Remarkable. Yeah. And also terrifying. So to allow you kind of where my head goes on that is I told you earlier that these plants have 10,000 head on inventory. So do the math on that real quick. 10,000 head, 35 pounds. I mean, I'm hanging additional semi loads from my roof, right? Like literally pull semis into the plant and just take a jack and start jacking them up to the roof. And so there's so much things you got to think about safety wise as you're bringing them through these plants. That's just a lot of weight. So a lot of that type of stuff is, what I dream about or daydream about.
Well, I think it's fascinating as we think about all the different I'll just think about my own career journey of like what I thought I would be working on in agriculture and some of the things I have actually gotten to do, or some of the problems that we have to solve are things I never anticipated would be problems to solve or challenges to overcome, or even the ripple effects from what you're talking additional pounds on an animal and what that means from an operation standpoint in a plant and how big of an impact that can have on an overall business or supply chain.
Well, and even number of boxes. I mean, you start thinking about the weight on boxes. We've got a lot of customers that limit the amount of weight they'll take in a box. So if I used to put 4 pieces in a box, and I put 3 pieces in a box, we do 44,000 boxes a day in Schuyler, Nebraska. So now all of a sudden I'm going up to about 46 to 47,000 boxes a day. Can my system handle that? I mean, it's a parade that never stops, and you just got to figure out where everything goes.
Yeah, yeah. It's a giant puzzle that we get
It
to
is.
put together again and again.
It is. Yeah.
So before we go into rapid fire, I have to ask Jarrod, if you were to look back and give advice to either a younger Jarrod or someone who is more maybe in the emerging leader phase of their career who wants to get to where you are someday, what advice would you give them?
For me specifically, it is weigh the criticality of decisions and spend time like in that. Meaning, whenever things would come to me and I would think they're a big deal because in the moment they were a really big deal, I treated them like they were a big deal. And as I reflect back now, I mean, there are decisions that I made, and if I was really really stepping back and saying, hey, you know, is somebody going to get injured as a result of this? Is there a food safety risk? Is there, what truly are the risks? And whenever you strip that back away, you can actually spend better time and debate things and have better decisions if you would actually like allocate the time correctly. And, younger in my career, I mean, everything was critical, everything was important. And not that it's not, I act with a lot of urgency that obviously came across, but, so it's not acting with urgency, but it's actually just saying, what is the critical and what do I get hyper or, what do I get excited about that we've got to really solve? And then how do I step back from that and say, you know what? The team's going to figure this out, and I don't need to be a part of this. Like it's okay. And there's, particularly younger, I jumped into things that I should have never probably jumped into because I thought they were such a big deal. But candidly, in the grand scheme of life, I mean, we're still healthy. We're still, it's not probably as critical as I thought it was.
I appreciate that advice. I can also say I have been there myself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we all have. I mean, it's human nature. It truly is. But it's, I lost my sister a couple years ago to she had been fighting pancreatitis for years, and going through stuff like that, I talked about, I kind of referenced, I didn't really talk about it, but I was a general manager when Cargill made the decision to shut Plainview down, and going through things like that, it makes you think really really quickly what's critical and what's important, and anyway, so yeah, it's created a great perspective for me. I hope it's created me to be a better leader, and it's somebody that that I can sit there and listen to, and obviously create empathy with others. And I think that's obviously important. Is all too often when we listen to people, we want to come with a solution, and there's most times people don't necessarily need to be fixed; they just need to be listened to.
What advice would you give to someone, a leader right now, who's in the trenches of those like tough life things, both in you got to make hard decisions at work or even at home?
Yep. Um, find joy in something. So, whenever I was a plant manager, I mean, there's 10, 12 different departments in that plant, right? Like it literally is a small city, and there could be 8 problems going on across that plant. And invariably through the day, I would go find the success story somewhere, because otherwise you can really get yourself mired down in everything that's going wrong and not spend enough time on what's going right. And if you do that long enough, you literally, like, your world will come in on you. And because you got to have a way to say, yeah, this is like, we're on the right path. This is going to be all right. And so it's figuring out what brings you joy, figuring out, find the success. Benjamin Franklin, I'll probably get this a little bit wrong, but in his autobiography, he actually talked about spending time. He wanted to better himself. So he would spend time and he wrote down everything he did wrong that day and everything that didn't go right. Well, and his thought process was, I'll focus on that and then tomorrow I'll do a better job. Well, he actually got to the point where he was just depressed because he was focusing on everything that was going wrong and not focusing on things that were going right. So he actually recognized that, flipped that around, and then started writing down success stories. Hey, this is what was great today, right? And I forget, you'll have to read the book to tell you, but I mean, it was days before he wrote the first thing that was good, because his mind had been trained so much on finding that. But then he started writing that, and then day by day, that list grew, and he literally said, the trick to getting through humanity or getting through life is literally focusing on what's well and understanding how I can do that better. And then that allows me not to do as many bad things or the things that I'm doing wrong, because I'm so focused on what's going better. So anyway, that's kind of paraphrased, but I always kind of use that logic a little bit of, man, find the good stuff, because the world will come in on you. And there's days that I have like that, and then I've got to step back and say, okay, so let's think about it. I mean, it's one of the largest beef businesses in America. We get to feed I'm feeding 90 million meals, 90 million meals a day across the protein business. I mean, there's a lot happening. I mean, there's a lot to be proud of. And, the other thing that I kind of keep in my mind is a tough day. because whenever I'm having a tough day, I've kind of got a gauge of what a tough day was. And I actually, in my home office here, I've got it's a genuine Texas beef poster, and it was signed by all of the leadership team from Plainview, Texas on the last day. And whenever I think of a bad day, that's my reflection of a bad day.
That's incredible. Yeah, that puts it into perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Bad days don't happen very often for me whenever I reflect back on that bad day.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, what a strong reminder, and visual reminder. Wow. Well, Jarrod, we are going to move into something a little bit more lighthearted, the
All
rapid
right.
fire section. So, Savannah will tell you I'm bad at this section, but it's because I always like to ask follow-up questions. But as best as we can, short answers only. What is one ag innovation that truly excites you right now?
I talked about it in the interview, but Carve, I mean, what we're doing with AI is pretty awesome.
What's an innovation or buzzword that you think the industry is getting wrong right now?
Fascinating. Sustainability. I think we're so focused on carbon and we're so focused on greenhouse gas emissions, and that is a part of sustainability. But I talked about it in the interview or in our conversation a little bit. Producer viability is sustainability. And I am truly worried about the next generation of agriculture coming into this, and how do we make it viable to where their kids and their kids want to come back. My kids, we're again blessed. I'm married into the family here in Kansas with Jamie, my wife, and then she's got two sisters. My father-in-law is still super active. Jamie's younger sister and her husband actually run the farm on a day-to-day basis. We're blessed to be a part of it. Our kids represent the fifth generation, and that's a heavy weight, right? Like, how do we make sure that this thing has the ability to continue? So anyway, when I think about sustainability, I think about the greenhouse gas aspect of it, but it's more that viability for American agriculture.
That one was worth diving into a little bit deeper. What is one thing most people misunderstand about meat packing and how it actually works?
That's a lot of fun. So they misunderstand, the skill set of our employees. A lot of times, folks will back and say, oh, they're meat packers, and the pride and the skill set that takes is huge. The other thing is just, this scale in having a tough time wrapping their head around the scale. But we literally, I mean, it's, we're putting meals on people's plates. I mean, that's what we do every day. And that's how we think about it. So it's not all about the scale. It's literally about, hey, that piece, that carcass, that animal, how do we get the most out of that and make sure we're respecting?
What is a book, podcast, or maybe even conversation that has influenced how you think about business strategy?
That's pretty good. So probably there's a couple of them, particularly when I think of early in my career. I think it's called "It's Your Ship" by let's see, he was a Navy captain, Abraham Abrahas, I think. Anyway, Michael Abrahas, I think is what his name is. Anyway, the thought process is like you are in charge of your own destiny there, right? Like you're in charge of things. So I think that one was really big for me, particularly when I was in the plants and challenging. Hey, this is what we do every day, but why do we do it that way? Let's figure out what we can do different. I mean, he did an awesome job with that book. And then this other one, and this is like a time of history, is a Zig Ziglar book and Closing the Sale. And the reason why I say that, and remember, this is from an operations person who started in sales, never went into sales. Um, Literally, all we do all day long is sell ideas. And Zig Ziglar goes through, I forget, it's like 70 different selling tactics. And literally all we do all day long as managers is we got to sell ideas. It was a great book for me.
I love that. I always love adding books to my list. Last but not least, what is your favorite cut of beef and how do you like to prepare it?
Oh, this is pretty awesome debate. So my favorite to eat is actually prime rib. My favorite to prepare is actually a petite tender, which comes off of the quad. It looks like a little cigar muscle. So I'm a huge smoker. I absolutely love to smoke meat. And the petite tender is the best item in my mind to smoke.
Love that. I also love a good prime rib. Both of those, good picks. Okay, Jarrod. So, last but not least, we always do a section of this podcast. If you have listened, you have heard them called hot takes. So, an unconventional or bold opinion that you have about the future of agriculture or leadership or the beef industry.
Yeah, probably should have prepared for that just a little bit, hadn't I? Since I am an avid listener, I knew this was coming. Um, let's see. I'm going to go back to the producer. I mean, as I think about agriculture, um, super involved. Our family's super involved in FFA. My daughter's actually leading the chapter here at Valley Heights, and then also the work we're doing with AFA. The future of agriculture is bright. Like the folks we've got coming in here, I think I am super excited about that knowledge and what we can do. But I would also say that we need to continue to challenge, and how do we make sure it's a viable, and candidly, probably the thing, and this is Jarrod, the producer, speaking. I actually am not a fan of a lot of government intervention. I don't think that's healthy in business, and I actually don't think it creates long-term viability. But what that means then is we've got to fix it through trade. We've got to fix it through other ways. Whether that be the RVO. When you think about like a grain farmer, how do we actually incentivize more biofuel production? How do we, what are things we can do to actually create a market in the United States? We've obviously got a little bit of an issue going on with China. So what can we do that way? I think we've got to figure out how to create, in America in general is ingenuitive enough to actually be able to do that. So anyway, that would be the aspect. When I think about the beef, what excites me the most is what genetically we've done across time. If you think about, in the last cattle cycle, we've increased the quality grade of cattle by 10 points. And I just continue to see that going higher. And what that is doing, I believe, is it is creating a higher demand for our product. And I think it's given consumers confidence, because when they go into a retail shelf and they grab a steak and they go home and cook it, they can cook it great, because it started with a great product, right? And so anyway, that really, really excites me. And then we talked some about the innovations and what we got coming forward. But these next leaders, we've got some talent within Cargill that are just absolutely awesome rock stars. And the stuff they're going to come up with is things I probably only dreamed about. And that's what really excites me.
Well, I appreciate everything you have shared with us, Jarrod. I could talk to you all day. But at AFA, we are all about building bridges. So where can our listeners learn more about what's happening at Cargill and connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. So I've got a LinkedIn page, so you're welcome to reach out on LinkedIn. And then Cargill's got a website there that you can, I think it's even cargill.com. So pretty simple. And always, if you're interested in a career opportunity or I'm going to put that plug in there too, shamelessly. So, love to chat with folks.
As you should. And whoever has listened has just heard what kind of leaders are at Cargill and how much you can learn from them. So absolutely, not shameless at all. Plug it. Jarrod, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I now have some new reading material, and I'm sure our listeners also learned a lot. So appreciate you being a guest on the Cultivating Leaders Podcast. Thanks for listening to the Cultivating Leaders Podcast, brought to you by Agriculture Future of America. If you've been here before, you know we value feedback as a gift. Please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing.